Welcome everyone back to another episode of Battlefield 4 Debriefing. So today we're checking out the Recon class for Battlefield 4, and I'm not going to waste any time. I'm just going to jump straight into this with the list of weapons to start with that you can expect for the Recon class in Battlefield 4. So at the top we have the CS L4, the M4085, the Scout Elite, the SV98 and the JNG90. Then we have the heavy hitters, the 338 Recon and the M98B. Now these weapons are special because they carry a .338 caliber round, which is massive, the highest caliber round in Battlefield 4 I believe, for sniper rifles at least anyway. Then we have the SRR61, which carries a massive .408 caliber round, which is as close as damned it to a 50 cal, besides the actual 50 cal in Battlefield 4. But obviously if they balance it out, because you don't want this being a one shot one kill from practically any range, as we know the 50 cal is, so obviously changing the velocity could be a viable option, making it fire the bullets slower so it doesn't do as much damage as maybe some of the other ones, so it's not the instant go-to choice. But then we have at the end the FYJS, which I believe is a Chinese sniper rifle. I'm very excited to see this. I'm very excited to see all the Chinese weapons in Battlefield 4. Otherwise, let's move straight on to the attachments for the Recon class. Now, starting off with the close range, these are more or less the same for every single class, but you got the reflex sight, red dot sight, the Coyote, Cobra, the Hollow, HD33, PKS, hollow sight. These are just US, Chinese and Russian variations of the same sight, so there's no real advantage over each one, it's just which one you kind of like or looks the best on your weapon. Then you have the two infrared night vision scopes, the IRNV, the standard one from Battlefield 3, which was a one-time zoom and it was green, it made everything very green. Then you have the FLIR, which is a two-time scope, but a black and white version of the previous one. So what kind of advantage could you get from either one? I'm not really sure. Obviously the night vision would be good for nighttime, the darkness when you turn off the power, and the other maybe for looking through smoke and stuff like that. Then we get to the medium range, which is the M145, the Prisma and the PKA 3.4 times. They're all 3.4 times, again just different variations, US, Chinese and Russian. You got the ACOG, the JGM, and the PSO1. These are the 4-time scopes. And then we move on to the long range, the CL6 times, this is a 6-time scope, and the PKS 07, a 7-time scope. Then we move on to the bit bigger caliber scopes, the 8 times rifle scope, the Hunter, which is a 20-time scope, so that will be for extreme ranges. Then you got the Ballistic, which is a 40-time scope, which is amazing. I never really thought that you'd need a 40-time scope, zooming in so you can see the hairs on someone's chin just before you're about to put a bullet in their brain. I don't really see how that's useful, but of course if you're going to be stationary in one point very far away from the action, a 40-time scope might be a good option. But anyway, let's move on to the accessories. Again, these are more or less the same, just some are certain to the Recon class. You've got the canted iron sights, which could be very useful if you're using a high power scope. Instead of using that at close quarter combat, just switch to your iron sights and there you go. Then you have the flashlight and the tac light. Now there is some certain differences with these weapons I thought was very interesting. The flashlight acts as the same as Battlefield 3's tac light. So the flashlight, you could point at enemies and blind them, and it's good for lighting up dark areas, whereas the tac light is good for lighting up dark areas, but only lights up when you aim down sights, which is, I think, pretty incredible and pretty useful, so you don't get spotted. It's very tactical, in other words, tac light, tactical light, so you don't get spotted by running around with this tac light everywhere on unless you're aiming down sights. Then you have the laser light, tri-beam laser and green laser light. The green is just a different variation of the laser light, no difference, just it's just green, which I like green, so that's good for me. Then you have the tri-beam, which is just 3 lasers to make it a little bit easier to hip fire with certain weapons if you can't really see the single laser very well. Then you have the laser light combo. You got the laser and the light, switch between by pressing a button. They're not on at the same time, which I thought they would be, but you can either have the accuracy with the laser light or the blinding and lighting up power of the tack light or flashlight, whichever one they decide to choose. Then we have the variable zoom scope. It's a 14 times option depending on your scope size, 8 times, 20 times, so you can either increase it or decrease it depending on your situation. Then lastly we have a rangefinder. Pretty self-explanatory, it finds the range for you, so when you aim down sights or aim down your scope, or when you're hip firing, you'll see a little number that constantly tracks your range. So wherever you're aiming, wherever your crosshairs are pointed, it will tell you how far that point is away from you. So you can tell how much bullet drop to add, how much bullet drop not to add maybe. Of course you do have to know the ranges of the map and your weapon to determine the bullet drop. If you're not very good at it, like me, then trial and error is probably the best option to start with. Otherwise, let's move on to the barrel attachments. Of course, you've got the muzzle brake, the flash hider. I don't really know the difference between these two. Obviously, they're meant to hide the muzzle flash when you fire. Obviously, the differences will become apparent when we play Battlefield 4. Then you have the suppressor, the L706 suppressor, the RB, the PBS4 suppressor, and the R2 suppressor. I don't really know the differences between these 4 suppressors. Obviously, some are Chinese, Russian, and US made suppressors. The only difference I think or can determine from these is some will make your gun a little bit quieter, maybe less quiet here and there depending on which one you choose. Obviously advantages and disadvantages will come from these, or unless they're just different sizes, styles, who knows. And the last one is called auxiliary, which I have no idea what that's about. If that's to do with bipods, foregrips, it could well be. I'm not entirely sure. Now, lastly, we move on to the gadgets. It's been a long ride, but we're here at last. Starting off things, we have the PLD, the portable laser designator. So you can take it around like binoculars and just laser designate vehicles here and there. And of course you've got the SOFLAM, which is a stationary laser designator that does things for you. You can just leave it and continue with your business. Then you've got the motion sensor, which is the motion balls from Bad Company 2, chuck one, and you can kind of sensor that area to see if there's any activity, enemies in that certain situation. Then you've got tugs, which is a portable thing you just put down, as we know from Battlefield 3. You've got the MAV, Recon Beacon, C4 and Claymores. Now, the C4 and Claymores are obviously new additions to the Recon class. I think Claymores are a brilliant idea and a brilliant addition to the Recon class, because when you're stationary in a bush behind cover, in a certain situation where you need to be as a sniper, long range combat is obviously your ideal purpose, so putting a Claymore behind you when you're sniping is very, very awesome. Then, lastly, an idea I came up with, what I thought would be pretty cool, from games such as Splinter Cell that gave the idea, having tri-quad rotor for the Recon class specific only would be awesome. So you can send this quiet but also limited drone, similar to the MAV, out into the battle so you can spot enemies and be basically a silent assassin, what you need to be. But also it could be obviously silent, have a low battery life, or limited height, or limited movement speed to obviously make it balanced for the MAV. And of course it can spot targets and maybe have some sort of shock or flash charge fitted onto it, so you can disorientate your enemies and then escape. I think that'd be awesome. I don't really know if they're going to add new gadgets for any class at all. Obviously DLC awaits us, so we have no idea what's to come. But it's been a long video, so if you've made it to this far, then I congratulate you. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, until next time.